When your snake tenses every time you reach in, do you actually know why? Most owners think it is a personality problem, or that some snakes just never warm up. But here is what nobody tells you. The reason your snake is still pulling back has almost nothing to do with the snake. It has everything to do with what you have been doing without knowing it was a problem. Subscribe right now. 6 reasons your snake has not bonded with you yet. And the specific fix for every single one. Stay until the end because the last one is the reason most experienced keepers are still failing, and they have no idea. And there's one thing I want you to remember as we go through this. Almost every mistake on this list comes from the same place. We will get to what that place is at the end. Because when you understand it, everything else on this list will finally make sense. 1. Have you been picking up your snake before it is ready? Have you ever reached into the enclosure and picked up your snake before it had any chance to signal whether it wanted to be handled? Most owners have. It feels like the right thing to do. The more handling, the better, right? Here is what most people do not realize. Every time you reach in and pick up your snake before it has moved toward your hand, you are starting that session by triggering the exact threat response you are trying to calm. The snake did not choose to engage. You made the choice for it, and its nervous system registered that. Research on agency and stress response in captive reptiles found that snakes handled without the opportunity to approach voluntarily showed significantly higher corticosterone levels during sessions than snakes given a choice. The difference was not subtle, it was measurable within minutes. Tomorrow, before you pick up your snake, try this. Open the enclosure and place your hand inside at enclosure level. Start palm up, motionless, not reaching toward the snake. Give it 60 seconds. If it moves toward your hand, that is your green light. If it does not, close the enclosure and try again the next day. A snake that walked onto your hand chose you. That is the session that builds trust. But here is what most owners do next that undoes even that progress. 2. Have you been ending sessions when your snake gets tense? Have you ever felt your snake tense up during handling and immediately put it back in the enclosure to avoid stressing it further? Almost every owner has done this. It feels compassionate. The snake was uncomfortable, so you removed the discomfort. Here is what's actually happening. Your snake's nervous system just learned something. Tensing up produced the outcome it wanted, return to the enclosure, and it will use that behavior again. You were not being kind. You were training your snake to display stress in order to end handling sessions. Research on operant conditioning in reptiles confirmed that snakes learn behavioral associations with measurable speed and consistency. When a defensive display reliably produces the outcome of enclosure return, that display gets used more frequently. The snake is not being difficult. It is doing exactly what its nervous system has learned is effective. From today, change one thing. When your snake tenses during handling, do not immediately return it. Wait, give it 30 seconds of stillness. Let the tension begin to drop slightly. You will feel it in the body. When there is even a small shift toward calm, that is the moment to end the session. The session that ends calmly is the session the nervous system files as tolerable. Do that enough times and the baseline changes. And here is what most people never consider. What happens outside the handling sessions matters just as much. 3. Have you been treating all interactions the same way? Have you ever walked up to your snake's enclosure, opened it, and immediately picked up the snake? Without any transition, any warning, any time for your snake to register that something is about to happen? Most owners do this every single time. It seems harmless. The snake is right there. You want to hold it. You reach in. But here is what most people do not realize. Your snake has been building a model of what your approach means. If your approach always leads immediately to being picked up, the moment you move toward the enclosure becomes a threat signal. The snake does not wait to see what you will do. It starts preparing for the thing that always happens. Research on anticipatory behavior in captive reptiles found that snakes develop precise associative maps of their keepers' behavioral sequences, approach patterns, movement rhythms, the specific way the enclosure opens. All of it gets filed and used to predict what comes next. For snakes, where approach always means handling, the approach itself becomes a stressor before a hand has even entered the enclosure. Starting today, vary what your approach means. Walk to the enclosure, sometimes just to look in, without opening it. Open it sometimes just to place fresh water without reaching for the snake. Let your presence near the enclosure become a neutral event that does not always predict handling. Do this 3 or 4 times a week between handling sessions. Your snake's anticipatory stress will drop within 2 weeks. And hey, if this is already changing how you see your handling sessions, hit like and subscribe. It is the best way to help us reach more reptile owners who actually want to understand what their snake is going through. 4. Have you been handling at the wrong time? Have you ever handled your snake in the morning, right after the lights came on? Because that was when you had time. Most owners have. Morning is convenient. The snake is visible. You reach in. Here is what is actually happening. A snake that has just come out of its overnight cooldown is a snake whose nervous system is running below optimal capacity. Its thermal regulation is incomplete. Its processing speed is slower. And its stress hormone response to handling is measurably more pronounced than it would be 2 hours later when it has had time to reach its preferred body temperature. Research on thermal effects on reptile stress physiology found that handling during suboptimal body temperature produced corticosterone responses significantly higher than the same handling session conducted at thermally optimal conditions. The snake that seems difficult in the morning is not being difficult. It is cold, and its nervous system is running on reduced capacity. From today, build a 30 to 45-minute rule into every handling session. Lights on, wait. Let your snake bask and reach temperature before any interaction. You will notice the difference in the first session. The snake that was tense in the morning is a different animal at midday. Same snake, different physiology, same session time investment, just scheduled differently. Here is what nobody talks about when it comes to building reptile trust. 5. Have you been thinking about trust as something that happens during handling? Have you been measuring progress entirely by how your snake behaves during handling sessions, treating everything between sessions as downtime that does not count toward the relationship? Almost every keeper does this. Handling is where trust gets built. The rest is just waiting for the next session. Here is what most people never find out. Trust between a snake and its keeper is not built only during handling. It is built continuously through every time you pass the enclosure, every feeding, every moment your presence registers in the snake's sensory environment. Your snake is building a multi-sensory profile of you every single day, whether you are holding it or not. Research on individual recognition in captive reptiles found that snakes associate specific sensory signatures, thermal pattern, movement rhythm, scent, with specific outcomes. A keeper whose presence is consistently associated with safe, predictable, non-threatening events builds a positive profile over time that the snake begins to respond to differently than unfamiliar individuals. This process runs between sessions, not just during them. Starting today, treat every moment near your snake's enclosure as part of the relationship. Move slowly and predictably when you pass it. Speak quietly and consistently near it. Not to it, just near it. So your voice becomes part of the familiar acoustic landscape. When you refill water, do it without rushing. When you check on it, do not tap the glass. Every calm, predictable moment near that enclosure is a deposit, and those deposits compound. And that brings us to the last one. This is the one I mentioned at the start, the one that explains every mistake on this list. 6. Have you been thinking about bonding as something your snake owes you? Have you ever felt frustrated that your snake still is not warming up despite everything you've done? Have you thought, I have been patient, I have been consistent, why is it still not working? Most owners have been there. It is one of the most common feelings in reptile keeping. Here is what is actually happening in that moment. You have shifted from building trust to expecting trust. And those two things produce completely different behavior from you and different movement energy, different handling pressure, different patience threshold. Your snake reads all of it. The keeper who is calmly building evidence is a different sensory experience from the keeper who is waiting for results. Research on stress contagion in reptile-human interactions found that snakes handled by keepers in an elevated emotional state, measured through cortisol markers in the keeper's skin and shifts in handling behavior, showed higher corticostrone responses than the same snakes handled by the same keeper in a calm state. Your emotional state during handling is not invisible to your snake. It is data. From today, change the frame. Every handling session is not a test of whether the snake has bonded with you. It is a deposit toward a balance you cannot see yet. The snake that is still tense today is a snake whose evidence base has not accumulated enough to shift the default. That is not a failure. That is a number. And the number goes up every time you do this right. Do not handle when you are frustrated. Do not handle when you are in a hurry. Do not handle when the outcome matters to you more than the session. Handle when you have nothing to prove and nowhere to be. That is the version of you your snake's nervous system needs to file as safe. Remember at the start when I said almost every mistake on this list comes from the same place? This is it. Every item, so picking up without consent, ending sessions at the wrong moment, making every approach mean the same thing, handling at the wrong temperature, ignoring what happens between sessions, waiting for results instead of building evidence, all of it comes from thinking about this relationship the wrong way. Your snake does not owe you a bond, it is building one. On a timeline that has nothing to do with your patience and everything to do with accumulated evidence that you specifically are safe. The fix is not more handling. It is better handling, less often, with more recovery in between, with a snake's nervous system at the center of every decision you make in that room. Do that consistently enough, and one day you will reach into the enclosure and your snake will move toward your hand before you've even offered it. That day is not luck, it is math.